Speed, the cornerstone of athletics. This ability to rapidly move is quite possibly the greatest overall asset across the entire sporting realm. But who exactly is the fastest athlete in each individual discipline? From football, basketball, baseball, and soccer, we have seen many explosive athletes do some pretty remarkable things. So today, let's take a deep dive and answer the question, who stands alone in each sport as the single fastest person to ever compete? Now, there are a few ways that we could look at this. There's top-end speed, there's quick acceleration, then there's the unique ability to use your movements to your advantage. However, for the purposes of this video, we'll take a look at each sport individually and break down why these athletes are so special. First, let's settle one debate that I've seen flying around the internet for years. No matter who you are, no matter what sport you come from, you simply cannot and will not challenge the great Usain Bolt. At his prime, he was completely and utterly untouchable, and as talented as many athletes are, this legendary Jamaican athlete truly is the single fastest human to ever live. However, this does not mean that other athletes don't have remarkable speeds, and with that in mind, let's take a look at our first category. Football. Out of all the sports, this is probably the most highly debated in terms of speed. Right away, you probably have at least 5 different athletes that come to mind. However, as far as pure raw speed that was efficiently utilized, I don't think there's anyone better than Bo Jackson. This guy was truly an athletic freak of nature, and at 6'1", 225 pounds, he is easily one of the most bruising, powerful, and talented running backs in the history of the NFL. Even though his intimidating stature does not match up with that of the traditional sprinter, his speed was simply undeniable. Now, if you're familiar with ESPN's 30 for 30 documentary on Mr. Bo Jackson, you probably know that he's one of the most mythical and legendary athletes in all of sporting history. This, in large part, is because he was unfortunately injured in the early stages of his career, so his real potential in both football and baseball was never quite reached. But just how fast was he, and how does he compare with other athletes throughout the history of the NFL?
Yeah, he's crazy.
Probably the most commonly used measurement of speed, at least in the NFL, is the 40-yard dash. This short and more explosive race is a strong representation of an athlete's speed potential on the field, and back in 1986, Jackson reportedly ran a time of 4.13. This performance would place Jackson as the single fastest NFL athlete in history, but sadly this time was not officially recorded or documented. So to this day, the official fastest time ever run in the combine by an NFL athlete is 4.22 seconds, which was achieved by John Ross back in 2017. Over the years, there have been countless discussions as to whether or not Jackson's performance actually took place. And when you look at the all-time fastest 40-yard dashes, it is difficult to believe that this time actually occurred. However, there is actually proof that this time is possible, and that's thanks to Christian Coleman, who was actually the world 100-meter champion back in 2019. Now, Coleman is one of the fastest sprinters in the history of the world, but just 2 years before he became the world champion, Coleman responded by running a 4.12. This time was amazing.
That's insane.
Coleman is mostly known for his explosive abilities out of the blocks, and this 4.12 was only 1/100th of a second faster than Jackson's 4.13. And if we dig a little bit deeper, we can see that at just 18 years of age, the similarities between these two athletes are striking. Indeed, Coleman went on to be much quicker than Jackson. However, this is clearly because Coleman trained for track, while Jackson trained for football and baseball. The fact that Jackson was so fast with such an unbelievably strong athletic build is nothing short of a miracle. And with such timeless talents, it's hard to argue that he's not worthy of the title as the single fastest NFL athlete in history. Basketball. In a sport dominated by height, coordination, and impeccable touch, speed is not quite as significant as in many other sports. But there are a handful of athletes that are sprinting beasts. As we previously mentioned, speed comes in many shapes and sizes, but in terms of speed and the ability to use it to your hooping advantage, there's really no one better than Russell Westbrook.
Nah, Russell.
At 6'3" and 200 pounds, he sizes up slightly smaller than many other athletes in the league. But the moment you see him perform, you understand that this is one of the most explosive and powerful athletes pound for pound in history. With an amazing top-end speed and quite possibly the greatest acceleration in the league, he takes this talent to a completely different level. Back in 2014, he ran from baseline to baseline in 3.36 seconds, which, according to the NBA, was over half a second faster than the average athlete for that year. Beyond this speed measure, his top-end speed with the basketball in his hands was measured at 21.6 miles an hour.
That's crazy.
Yes, these numbers are very impressive, but nothing compares to his actual gameplay. In virtually every game, you're almost guaranteed to see at least one jaw-dropping moment where he somehow makes other players look like they're standing still. In addition to being a human highlight reel, he also has a ridiculous amount of NBA accomplishments, and with all of these different characteristics combined, it's hard to argue that he has not utilized his massive speed to his advantage. Baseball. Throughout the history of Major League Baseball, there really is no single athlete with a better use of overall speed than Rickey Henderson. Not only is he the only athlete to ever steal over 1,000 total bases, but his career total is a whopping 1,406, placing him over 400 steals ahead of the next closest athlete. At 5 feet 10 inches and 195 pounds, his build is actually quite similar to many of the world's greatest sprinters. And the moment you see him run, you understand why he's held in such high regard. According to MLB statistics, he clocked in at a top speed of 32 feet per second, which, if we convert this to miles an hour, comes in at 21.8 miles per hour.
No, that's crazy.
This is still far short of most track and field athletes, but given that he ran this speed with baseball cleats, long pants, and likely without ever reaching his real top-end speed, it is undeniably impressive.
That boy diving.
I would say Henderson has more than earned his title as the fastest athlete in MLB history.
His ass got it for sure. His ass getting all
Soccer.
type of slow burn
Alongside
shit, too.
American football, the use of speed in this sport is hugely important.
Damn!
However, unlike other
What the
sports,
fuck?
soccer players are almost constantly running throughout the entirety of the matchup.
Nah, that's kind of
In a recent study from the University of Michigan, the average distance for a complete game by a soccer player in the professional ranks is anywhere between 6 and 8 miles. And while this endurance does play a significant role, having explosive speed is even more important. Throughout the history of this sport, the fastest recorded athlete is Gareth Bale, who clocked a superhuman speed of 22.9 miles an hour. Probably the greatest example of Bale's raw speed comes from this one video, where he is actually out of bounds, but he somehow manages to not only outrun his defender taking the long route, but he somehow manages to make his trek all the way to the goal. This was one of the most dynamic drives I've ever seen, and with absolutely amazing top-end speed, he completely embarrassed his defender.
Yeah, he burnt him bad.
These four athletes certainly have amazing running abilities. However, if we compare their top speeds with that of Usain Bolt, it really isn't even close.
Not at all.
Indeed, these other athletes likely had a little bit more to give in terms of miles an hour. However, for Bolt's all-time fastest speed, which he accomplished in 2009 while setting his world record, is the fastest a human being has ever run.
27.8?
Thanks for watching,
Hey,
everyone.
yo,
And as
that's
always,
kind of wild.
until
I'm not
next
gonna
time.
lie.